Color me surprised if the United States actually defaults on its debt. I doubt that is actually ever going to happen.
This morning, there was a new concern about the status of the debt ceiling negotiations in Washington with just a week to go before the debt ceiling deadline.
A Democratic official familiar with the talks tells NBC News the White House and Republican leaders in Congress have hit a speed bump, and they're accusing House Speaker Kevin McCarthy of refusing to compromise with President Biden. NBC News business and data reporter Brian Chung is here now with the latest. So we should point out this reporting from our White House team on the talks. We have not gotten a response from Republicans yet, but where do things stand right now? What are the main sticking points with the negotiations?
Yeah, we're only a week out from that June 1st deadline by which the Treasury estimates that the United States will run out of money to keep the lights on for the nation. Now, when we talk about where the impasse is between Republicans and Democrats, it's largely about spending. So the Biden administration, acknowledging that they're going to have to compromise here, has said, we agree to freeze spending, but Republicans are saying we want to see spending cut and reduced over, let's say, the next 10-year period. Now, the length of that negotiation is also under debate here. But either way, it seems like the news that we got just early this morning saying that there's a speed bump, at least from the Democratic view of things, does underscore that there's a lot more work to be done if we want to avoid that June 1st cliff that we might be going over soon.
Just remind the Republicans that if the United States does default, that they're going to be affected as well, and they'll be extremely willing to pass something.
First, next Thursday, what are some of the big ways Americans could be directly impacted by this?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of concerns over the major programs that millions of Americans rely on. When you talk about Social Security, you think about Medicare and Medicaid. You also think about the food stamp program, also known as SNAP. These could all be programs that could potentially see cuts beyond June 1st, because if the government can't keep the lights on, well, it's going to have to decide which rooms it does keep the lights on in. Now, whether or not Social Security, food stamp, Medicaid, Medicare would disappear on June 2nd is definitely up for speculation.
Okay, we shouldn't be cutting safety nets first. What should be cut is checks to the politicians that are unable to pass a bill. Let the people in Congress give up their coin.
One reason is because that June 1st deadline is an estimate by which we will run out of money. It's possible we could actually extend past that, although the June 1st date is kind of part of the negotiation tactic. But then secondly, we don't know how the government's going to go about that process because, as I want to remind you, it's never happened before. The United States has never defaulted, so there's no playbook for it.
This is perhaps creating some anxiety for folks who are wondering, what should I or maybe shouldn't I do with my money right now as a precaution? Any tips?
Yeah, well, when it comes to 401ks, for example, there's a lot of nervousness in markets right now. Yesterday was a red day on the markets, and it likely could spill further if there were to be more concerns. But look, 50-30-20 method is one good way to go about having a rainy day fund, which everyone should have, broadly speaking, anyway.
Right, everybody should have savings and stuff, but when wages don't keep up with the cost of living, and, the cost of rent is, 1 to 2/3 of your paycheck, is going to be hard to save.
20%. Put 20% of your income into savings. Use the other of the 80% to buy things that you want and also need. But having a rainy day fund to get through the bumpiness of what could be a very headline-intensive next few weeks.
But it's also funny how so many people push the idea of having a savings account when even the rich people, these corporations and stuff, they don't have a rainy day fund. That's why, during COVID, these business owners freaked out because they had no way of paying their employees because they didn't have any savings for themselves.
Weeks might be a good prudent thing to do.
Treasury Secretary, other experts are warning that defaulting could potentially trigger a financial crisis. What is at stake here for the economy?
Yeah, well, look, this debt ceiling negotiation is happening at a very precarious time for the economy already. When we talk about high inflation, higher interest rates, we had the bank collapses only a few weeks ago. So this is a very fragile economy, as we kind of already saw ahead of the debt ceiling negotiations. So if we do go over that cliff, then yes, it could trigger a financial crisis because it's going to undermine the Treasury securities, which are largely seen as the most liquid, safe securities in the world. It's government debt. The United States has always paid its bills. If it doesn't do that, that could really drop the underpinning of the entire global financial system. It's very dramatic. But again, as I want to emphasize, since 1960, 78 times we've moved to resolve the debt ceiling. Hopefully, let's make it 79.